Welcome back, basketball fans. Let me just change something. There we go. So, obviously, we're in the midst of the NBA playoffs, and this brought up obviously a topic that people have been talking about from the beginning of the year and years back when Chris Bosh and LeBron James joined Miami's Dwayne Wade to create a super team. Then we saw Durant join, obviously, the Golden State Warriors. And the whole premise of super teams was really pushed and talked a lot then. And people were discussing if this was good for the NBA or negative. If you had all these teams with all the money putting all of these great players together to dominate the sport, then how was the league overall as far as competitiveness, right? This has been an ongoing topic, obviously, for years. When you go back, if you're a hardcore basketball fan, you know that super teams are nothing new. You can go back to the 1972 Los Angeles Lakers with Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain. Super team. Losing to Boston, which was a super team. The Lakers with Magic, Worthy, Byron Scott, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Super team. Playing and beating and losing to the Celtics with Parrish, McHale, Larry Bird. Super team. So this is nothing new. It's just obviously with social media and the new generation of sports fans that we live in, these kind of things are highlighted a lot more for clickbait and attention. But it brings up three teams that were really manufactured based on trying to use name recognition to put former All-Stars on a same roster to create a team of high-paid players to somehow win the title. For major cities like Los Angeles, this is normal. They obviously have a lot of money, so they need to keep the team relevant. They need to keep them right up there as a potential champion. So they do spend lots of money. We just saw this with the Dodgers this year, spending tons of money on two Japanese pitchers, right? Teams that have money spend it because they don't want to drop from being one of the best franchises in the sport. So let's get to this. Obviously, we're talking about the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Phoenix Suns. So feel free to leave your opinion below. So let's chop this up as we go. Obviously, the Lakers, we'll look at them first and foremost because this is a team that consistently puts superstar players together to try to manufacture titles. We remember when Gary Payton and Karl Malone joined Kobe and Shaq. And on paper, people were like, damn, now you got a real legitimate point guard, Kobe, a real legitimate power forward who can stretch the zone, right, or stretch the key by hitting face-up jump shots. Also can run the floor and then Shaq down low. But of course, that team didn't work out very well at all. If anything, they were very disappointing, right? Now we look at this particular team, the Lakers, and obviously they are a good team. When you have guys like LeBron James and AD on your squad, people have high expectations for what you're going to do during the season. So it was a matter of them trying to put complementary players together that would really bring out the best in everyone, right? So you add players, obviously, like Price or Prince, sorry, who's obviously one of those glue type of players, a stretch three, a guy that can play defense, a guy that can hit that corner three. You obviously have guys like Jackson Hayes, who is very athletic, very long. He's a perfect complementary player coming off the bench to replace AD. Obviously, he gets limited minutes, but he brings tons of energy off the bench. And defensively, you don't really lose out on what AD gives you. But obviously, offensively, he's not as well-rounded or the kind of player that AD is. You bring in Rui Hachimura, right? A stretch four, solid physical specimen, very good jump shot, and a guy that could really complement the team by spreading the floor, opening up driving lanes for LeBron, obviously not allow people to double team AD down low. You have Austin Reeves, who really has been a great complementary player. You know, they don't really use a point guard per se, and that could be one of the downfalls when you're using LeBron, who likes to control possession, and Austin Reeves, who's more of a shooting guard more than a point guard. You're losing some of the intangibles that you get from a legitimate point guard. But Reeves obviously is a good shooter. He's a smart player, and he's worked out very well with his team. So on paper, you can see why at the end of the season they really push forward and have done well. And obviously, when we're talking about a super team like this, it's not the biggest system of a super team that we've ever seen. You have two legitimate all-stars on the squad. But Westbrook was on this team recently as well, when they literally got a point guard in to complement the team who was an all-star, an MVP caliber opponent. And we saw what happened to that team. Lack of chemistry, wasn't able to work out very well, ended up bringing Westbrook off the bench because they felt that the team worked better with him off the bench, even though he's really the starting point guard on a team. But obviously, when you have LeBron James, who wants to dominate possession so much, you're taking the ball out of Westbrook's hands and you're turning him into more of a defensive player and a three-point shooter, which, one of those is something he does very well in. The other one, he doesn't do very well. So you're kind of limiting yourself. So you do better actually having Austin Reeves as a three-point shooter who can handle the ball as opposed to having a Westbrook. So that's one of the reasons why, obviously, Westbrook was shipped out. I'm not a Laker hater. I grew up a Philadelphia 76ers fan. I like Dr. J and Bobby Jones and Maurice Cheeks and Moses Malone, and that was my team of preference. But I was a big Kobe fan, so obviously I did support the Lakers during Kobe's run there. Still a huge Kobe fan. Rest in peace, my man. And so I don't hate on the Lakers. I don't wish them downfall or destruction. But it was no surprise that this year, running into Denver in the first round, that it just wasn't going to work out very well for them. They've lost consistently to Denver since last year's playoffs, where they got swept. I mean, and a team like that, as stacked as they were, to get swept by Denver, a team with very little playoff experience, to go in there and literally sweep you. It was embarrassing for sure, especially when we're talking about LeBron James, who some people hearken as the best NBA player of all time. I know he's got the most points, but points don't necessarily translate to the best. A lot of people think Bill Russell obviously was one of the best players in NBA history. He was not a scorer. What he was an intangible team player and captain who brought everyone together and made sure everyone did their job properly and won title after title after title after title after title, right? Winning is everything when we talk about major league sports. And well, LeBron James has won. There's been many situations where you can say that his performances and his team's performances, more so than anything, have disappointed. And I do think this year is an example of that. If they end up going on to be swept for the second straight year by Denver again, you have to ask yourself, what did management do so that this wouldn't happen again? What did they learn from last year's playoffs? And how did they complement LeBron and AD and improve leading into this season? Because if you look at it, you would have to say they did nothing if you get the same results. The same results mean that you were totally ineffective in whatever you did do. And obviously, LeBron is getting old near the end of his career. And you hope, like Cleveland, when he was there, that you're going to put the kind of players around him that will complement him and make sure that you get the best performances out of the team. But the Lakers have disappointed in a very big way so far this year. And it looks like LeBron James, potentially maybe leaving LA. I mean, maybe he'll come back next year, but what can you really expect from another season of AD and LeBron James with a cast and character crew of misfits that obviously haven't done their job so far this year? Let's move to number 2. Well, let's talk about Phoenix, because obviously Phoenix was a team that was getting tons and tons of push this year, for good reason, even last year, right? When KD went to Phoenix, after, of course, going to Brooklyn with Kyrie Irving, where he wanted to do it himself. Yet in doing it himself, he brought Kyrie Irving with him, which isn't really you doing it yourself. But another super team that flopped and imploded, so much so that obviously both Irving and KD ended up going in different directions, and Harden, who joined that team as well, another addition to a super team, which didn't work out at all. Did that team even make the playoffs? And we know how they did, very poorly, so much so that it was, of course, Steve Nash who was faulted. But Steve Nash isn't the one who signed these players to become part of a team, hoping that you could bring a title to New York City just based on having 3 stars on a team. Yet you're not thinking about team. You're not thinking about chemistry. You're not thinking about how these pieces work together, right? And at the end of the day, we saw how that worked. It imploded. KD came to Phoenix, joining Booker, and people were thinking, wow, now this team is a super team, great team. And then they brought Bradley Beal. So then you end up losing a lot of your complementary players to bring in another shooting guard. But you already have Booker, you have Eric Gordon. Why do you need Beal? How does he complement the 3 shooters you have on your team now? He doesn't. What you needed was more of a guy like Green from Golden State, right? You have him surrounded by 3 great shooters, and he's the one that helps complement them by playing shutdown defense down low, being a great passer and ball mover, so that these 3 players get touches. One player is not controlling possession, while the other ones are waiting around, not doing anything. And unfortunately for Phoenix, they don't have that. They have a very solid big man in Nurkic, right, who's a very good player. You got some guys off the bench, obviously like Drew Eubank, who's solid. But overall, this team has just been very, very disappointing. You cannot build a team only on shooters. There's only one ball. So at any time, one person has the ball. So then you have to ask, what are those other 3 or 4 people doing during those moments? Obviously, Golden State, they had a very fluid offense with lots of movement, making it very difficult for you to key up on one player, and thus getting a lot of open looks for their great shooters. Phoenix has been very inconsistent. Bradley Beal has been consistently injured. They haven't had a season where all the players have been really playing together so they could get a really good feel on how they're going to play. Bradley Beal, Eric Gordon, Booker, solid shooters, but not the best defenders, not the best rebounders, not the best assist men. So now you put all this responsibility on KD to really be your best defender, a very important rebounder, and your clutch scorer. And we saw how it's worked. I mean, today they ended up losing and looked terrible, terrible. And they were playing Minnesota, who in the first half weren't hitting their shots, weren't looking good, looked very rushed. Obviously, they had lots of foul trouble early, but even going through those problems, they still were winning the game fairly easy without really anyone feeling that Phoenix really was getting much momentum in the game. And, you know, I would say this series is over, and it'll be unlikely to see Phoenix win another game in the series. I think Minnesota is just going to do better. I mean, they've been trying to obviously, Ant-Man, but, you know, Minnesota has a good team. And that's the key word, a team. You have complementary players that work together. And because of that, you have faith rebounding wise. They dominate on the boards, kind of like Denver is dominating on the boards against LA, right? And that's been one of the key things when you look at these 2 series in the playoffs so far. The team that was able to dominate on their boards is the team that inevitably is winning. Because if you get rebounds, you get second shots. A lot of times second shots are more open because the defense is not in position. And you know, those teams tend to win. And that's exactly what's been going on. As far as Phoenix now, I mean, they had the big man. They got rid of him to Portland because he wasn't the complementary player they wanted. Then they brought in Nurkic, who is, you know, more of a complementary player for sure. he does a little bit more of everything. But at the same time, the team is still missing that green type of forward who can stretch the floor, play tough D, get the key rebound, and you can run the offense through him on the high post, right? And it'll be interesting to see how Phoenix adjusts moving forward in this series. I don't have much faith they're going to beat Minnesota. I mean, Ant-Man shooting has been off, and still they've been winning pretty easily. And obviously they've been trying to integrate what's his face, the big man. Well, I can't think of his name, the three-point shooting guy from Kentucky. Obviously, he's coming off of injuries, and they're just starting to bring him back into the rotation. And that's kind of thrown a lot of things off, because obviously you had Reed, who was playing phenomenally this year as a replacement for him, shooting very well, rebounding, and playing very good defense. Now him coming off the bench, he's been kind of inconsistent. His shots look kind of ugly, not nearly as effective as he had been as a starter. And of course, the Kentucky guy, sorry, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, he also is getting in foul trouble because you're not in shape, you're reaching too much, you're not doing what you have to do to be a solid positional defender. And that's what he is, a positional defender. Obviously not a great one-on-one defender. But when you get him out of the game, it really hurts them offensively. When he's there, the floor opens up for Ant-Man in a huge way, because you can't double team Ant-Man and leave him open for threes. He's probably the best three-point shooter on the team. It'll be interesting what goes on moving forward. But I don't have high hopes for this year's Phoenix Suns. Let's move to the last guys on the roster. Last but not the least, actually more of a good thing, which doesn't really necessarily work out, I guess, eh? And here we go. The great LA Clippers. Clippers got some good youth. When you look at their team, I'm pretty impressed, really. One of the biggest problems they have is they thought, well, if two superstars couldn't win, let's go to three. Well, if three superstars can't win, let's go to four. And now that four superstars can't win, does that mean next year they're going to go for five? I mean, this is not the way to build a team. It's just been ineffective. And they really finished the year looking very well, even without Kawhi Leonard playing. And obviously people were excited about him coming into the playoffs, just to add that extra dimension. We've seen that he is a guy who's won an NBA title, multiple NBA titles. He's also a guy that, can play shutdown defense, can be your go-to scorer. So that's really what people were hoping he would bring. But obviously coming off of a month out, him being inconsistent all year, injuries, sitting on the bench, resting, doing what he's done really in his career, which really takes away, I think, some of the chemistry of the squad. You add guys, obviously, like George, who's a great player, but a complimentary player. Like today, both Leonard and George had less than 10 points. I mean, when you're two star players who are primary, offensive players, can't even crack double digit in scoring, then you would think that, well, fuck, defensively, they must be all over the place, rebounding, moving the ball, shutting down their player. But yet both were ineffective. I mean, it wasn't that difficult of a game for Denver to win. And Luka was shooting terribly today, but still they won easily. At no time did I feel that the Clippers really were going to threaten them. I felt it was pretty clear cut, and I felt Dallas was going to win, and they did, going away. So much so that in the fourth quarter, they rested their stars, put them on the bench, because they knew they had the game, and they didn't even have to worry about a late sort of push by the Clippers. Then you think, of course, of Westbrook, very good defender, very athletic player, brings a lot of intensity to the squad, so much so that he ended up getting kicked out of the game today. So his intensity can hurt you. It can help you. Today, it hurt them. And then, of course, you have the fourth one, Harden. Harden, who was a former MVP, the beard. Yet today he was their most effective scorer as a starter, but yet he didn't really make his team better. The team didn't look like they were firing in all cylinders. It's just, again, you have one ball and you have those three players, of course, Kawhi Leonard, George, and Harden, who all want to touch the ball, all want to shoot, and it's not necessarily making the team better, right? When you think of guys like Norman Powell, who comes off the bench, I mean, a very good complementary six-man off the bench, great shooter, obviously pretty athletic is in his own right. You end up having guys like what's his name? Where is he? Where's Man? Oh, Terrence Mann, who brings that athleticism and length to the roster, a lot of energy as well. I mean, Mason Plumlee, big man down low, a guy that can really clog up the zone. Bones Hyland coming off the bench, who can really be a scorer when you need him coming off the bench. And then you have guys like Coffee and Boston, right, who really impressed me this year. Two, long players, good three-point shooters, obviously good college players, and they've really played well when I watched them. But then when you watch this team, I don't know, something is missing, whether that's heart, which is something you could say really about all three of these teams. I mean, at least with the Clippers, you can look at Westbrook and go, like, he's their heart, right? He's their emotion. He's the guy that's going to fucking get angry and hard foul somebody and hold people accountable. Phoenix, they don't got anyone. LA, they don't got anyone, right? So then when you think about this, it's just like, how are these teams expected to do well just because you're signing big name all-star players? Quite a few of whom are past their best as well. So not only are you getting players that aren't at their best, but you're also paying too much money in the process, right? So how can you expect this team to succeed if that's what you're going to do to basically create a squad? It's just inevitably it's going to fail. It's not going to work. It's not going to be effective. You look at a team like Oklahoma, right? This is a team that built through the draft, and they drafted for needs, right? And you've seen how that's worked out. Obviously, making a trade for a future MVP point guard definitely did not hurt them. And who did they get rid of in the process? Didn't they trade with the Clippers, right? That was the Clippers that should have had SGA and traded him for who? I can't remember off the top of my head, but how does that trade look now? Instead of working and developing the team the way you should have, where they could have an elite point guard who would complement Kyrie and George, right? And a Plumlee down low, and then another big man who could stretch the floor and throw a body around and rebound. Now, all of a sudden, you would be real contenders. But you're bringing in a James Harden, ball hog, who's just going to over dribble, right? A lot of times the players are watching him perform and not participating in their own, getting out of the flow, not really involved. If you're not involved offensively, it's hard to stay involved defensively, right? This just shows you some of the problems that happen when you're a big team and you want to have star players so you can sell jerseys and obviously sell seats and get people to come watch you. But you're not going to win. You're not going to be a great team if this is the way you're building your franchise, right? Jordan won, not because they surrounded him by star-studded players. They surrounded him by players that complemented him and gave him what he needed to be his best and make sure the team was its best. You bring in Ron Harper, who was an all-star, right, for Cleveland, came to Chicago and became a complementary piece, barely ever shot. You bring in Rodman, who obviously had been a complementary key part of several franchises, San Antonio, Detroit, and now you bring him to Chicago and he gives you exactly what you need. Energy, great rebounding, a guy that doesn't need to get shots. So you don't need to worry about getting him possessions. You don't need to work an offense through him. And then you have Scottie Pippen, right? The unicorn, able to do everything. Kukoc, right? A very tall, offensively gifted big man, right? When you have guys like Rodman, Jordan, and Pippen, you can have a defensive player like Kukoc that probably isn't the best, but what he brings offensively gives you something different when you need it. A Steve Kerr, spot up jump shooters, defensively not the best, but his great shooting opens up the key, allowing the team driving lanes and obviously to perform at their best. This is what a team is. You build a team, right? Fine, you're taking players that maybe some of them had been on winning teams prior, but it wasn't so much, well, obviously that's an intangible, but it's also they fit the system. They were pieces that you needed to plug in to be at your best. And these three teams mentioned today, they're just not built that way. And if I was the owner, I'd be asking the GM, what the fuck, man? And maybe it's the owner's fault, right? We know obviously LA wants to win, so they feel pressure to do it. We know the Clippers got big money behind them, so they think just spending money is going to answer all your prayers. Phoenix too. And there you go. C'est la vie. That shit does not work. We see it once again. Leave your comments down below. Do you think these teams can win in their present form, or do they need to make some big changes? Thanks for watching. Leave your comments below and let me know what you think.